Dispatch to Delta 3. We've got an emergency call from 1421 7th Avenue. Male caller, possible 10 to 52 in progress. Be advised, operator reported intense screaming in the background, but the voice was muffled. Caller seemed to be trying to speak, but it didn't sound right. Last audible words were, "It's coming. It's here." Delta 3, confirm response. Over.
The call came through at exactly to 17 in the morning, a shift usually reserved for drunks arguing with dumpsters or noise complaints. That turned out to be raccoons and addicts, but this night had a different weight to it. A silence that didn't rest, it lingered waiting. The 911 call lasted only 36 seconds. The dispatcher said the screams were like someone trying to shout through stitched skin. When the line cut off, a patrol car was on the road within 3 minutes. At the address, officers found the door slightly ajar, hallway lights flickering, and blood spattered across the far wall. No sign of a struggle, no body. Just a single message scratched onto the plaster in red. "I tried to warn you." It was a rundown studio apartment, cracked walls, the sour smell of cheap bleach failing to cover something worse. The TV was still on, displaying a frozen image, a feed from a city surveillance camera, broadcasting a street corner miles away. No one could explain how it got there. Beside it, a cracked cell phone played a distorted audio loop, the same muffled screams, repeating every few seconds, as if the device refused to acknowledge the call had ended. When the lead detective stepped in, he paused, stared, and said only one thing: "This isn't a normal case." He was right. Nothing that followed would be. Officer Ramirez was the first to enter the apartment, flashlight trembling slightly in his grip. He'd handled his share of odd calls, mental health crises, hallucinating veterans, even one man who claimed his refrigerator was whispering secrets. But this felt different. The air inside the apartment was thick, like walking into a space that hadn't breathed in hours. The badge on Ramirez's chest reflected dimly against the screen glow, where the paused video feed still displayed that same distant street corner. A single figure stood on the screen, unmoving, silhouetted under a flickering lamp. Ramirez squinted, then froze. The figure raised its head. On the screen, "Live." But the feed was frozen. His partner, Officer DeWitt, found the phone. He picked it up with a gloved hand and tilted his head at the sound. The same loop, distorted screams, not quite human, repeating like a broken hymn. DeWitt turned to Ramirez and said, "Is it just me, or do those screams sound familiar?" Ramirez nodded slowly. It did. They both realized at the same time. It sounded like the caller had no tongue. That was when they saw the note, not the one scratched into the wall, but the second one, folded carefully and placed under the leg of a coffee table. To keep it from wobbling, DeWitt bent down and pulled it free. It was written in blocky red ink, all capital letters, pressed so hard it had bled through the paper. "If you're reading this, it's already too late." Neither officer spoke for nearly 30 seconds. Then DeWitt broke the silence with a whisper, "What the hell kind of prank is this?" But even as he said it, neither of them believed it was a joke, because there were no signs of entry, no fingerprints, and worst of all, no voice was ever heard from the caller again. Back at the station, the incident was filed under an anomaly, a label used when no one knows what else to write. But it didn't leave the minds of the officers who answered that call. Ramirez couldn't sleep for days. DeWitt started requesting patrols in daylight only. What haunted them most wasn't what they saw, but what they didn't. The apartment showed no signs of anyone living there. No clothes, no dishes, no toothbrush, just an empty shell with that one paused screen, still powered on, still displaying the frozen image of a figure who never moved, yet seemed to watch them. The file sat untouched for 72 hours until it disappeared from the system. No deletion log, no administrative trace, just gone. That same week, the precinct received another 911 call, same screaming, same distorted audio. But this time, when traced, the location was an abandoned church outside the city, condemned and locked since 2003. A rookie officer, unaware of the previous incident, was sent to investigate. He never arrived. His patrol car was found parked neatly in front of the church's collapsed entrance, engine off, keys inside, radio dead. The seatbelt had been buckled, and the driver's seat still warm, as if he had vanished mid-breath. No footprints, no struggle, just silence and the distant smell of smoke, though nothing nearby had burned. From that point on, every officer who tried to reopen the first file ended up resigning, transferring, or in one case, disappearing entirely. Internal Affairs refused to comment, but whispers began circulating about cursed calls, about a voice that doesn't belong to a living throat, about warnings that came too late. And behind locked doors, some officers confessed a chilling truth. They weren't afraid of dying. They were afraid of answering the next call. Detective Lisa Moreno sat behind her desk long after the rest of the station had emptied for the night. The light above her flickered every few seconds, casting brief shadows across the stack of reports she refused to close. She had been the first officer to respond to the call from the boy's phone. She remembered the static, the muffled scream that wasn't quite a voice, and the address that came through barely intelligible before the line went dead. Something about the call hadn't felt right. Not the panic she was used to panic, but the silence that followed it. When she arrived on scene, it was already too late. The door to the basement had been pried open. The chair was overturned. Rope, blood, and a cracked phone screen lay scattered like clues meant to confuse, not solve. But no sign of the boy, no sign of a struggle beyond the immediate mess. Just that same sickening silence from the call, now settled over the entire room like a second layer of dust. She'd read through every report, interviewed neighbors twice, even went back to the call recording so many times she could recite the static patterns like music. And still nothing. The badge on her desk, hers, felt heavier each day. Every night she told herself she'd stop thinking about it, that there were other cases, that this one had no leads, no trail. But something kept clawing at her gut. She couldn't shake the feeling that the boy had called for a reason, that maybe it wasn't a cry for help in the traditional sense. Maybe it was a message or a warning, and if so, then why was the message meant for her? Lisa went back down to the basement for the 4th time that week. Alone, no backup, no daylight, just her flashlight, her instinct, and the lingering sense that something wasn't right. The basement looked empty, as always, but it carried a weight that felt unnatural, like even the air was too afraid to move. She scanned the concrete walls and the shelves lined with boxes labeled with names she didn't recognize. Some names were crossed out in red ink. Others were underlined neatly and quietly. The floor still held the faint outline of the chair, the phone, the boy's shadow. Lisa crouched, pressing her palm against the cold ground and staying perfectly still. That's when she heard it. Breathing, soft, faint, as if coming from inside the walls themselves. She froze, tried to follow the sound, but it vanished just as quickly as it came. When she stood back up, something had changed. There was a folder in the corner that hadn't been there before. The cover was worn, almost rotted, but in faded black letters it read, Code 9 to 11, Internal Communication Protocols, Classified. Inside were photos, not of the boy, but of others, each one with their mouths sewn shut, all of them listed as missing years ago. And one detail made Lisa's skin crawl. Every victim had a 911 call number listed at the top of their file. Calls that were made and answered, and somehow all rooted to her. Lisa dropped the folder. The basement was silent again, but the silence now felt full, heavy, like the walls knew what she didn't. This wasn't just a case. It was something deeper, something designed, and slowly it was turning its eyes toward her. Back upstairs, Lisa tried to call her supervisor. The phone rang once, then cut off. She dialed again. This time, the line connected, but all she heard was static, followed by her own voice. Not live, a recording, one she had never made. Unique Delta 4. Suspect is conscious, repeat conscious, standing, approaching. I need backup now. Then silence. Her blood went cold. That audio didn't match any case she'd worked. It was her voice, unmistakably, but the urgency in it, the fear, was foreign. Before she could react, her screen flickered and locked. The precinct's internal system shut her out completely. Files vanished, reports disappeared. The folder she had found in the basement, gone, not missing, erased. She rushed to the evidence locker, only to find it sealed. Her badge no longer worked. The same badge left beside the body. Lisa looked at the security camera in the hallway. The red light blinked. Someone was watching. Maybe they always had been. A fax machine near the admin desk began to print. No one had used it in years. She tore the page free. It was a copy of her 911 call log, but it had future dates on it. One of them matched tomorrow, and beside that timestamp was a note, final call. No response required. Lisa stared at it, her thoughts spinning. Was she next, or had she already been marked long ago? All at once, she realized something terrifying. The case was never about the boy. It was a trigger meant to pull her in, and it worked. Whatever system she thought she served had just erased her place within it. Outside, thunder rolled low. Over the city, inside, Lisa sat alone in the break room, staring at her disconnected radio, waiting to hear her own voice one last time. Lisa didn't go home that night. She didn't clock out, didn't call anyone. She simply wandered the halls like a ghost. The precinct felt different now, not just abandoned, but intentionally hollowed out, as if someone had scooped out its memory, leaving a shell of rooms that looked familiar but meant nothing. Doors were locked that shouldn't be. Others creaked open into places that didn't exist on any blueprint. A boiler room that went 3 floors deeper than the foundation. A janitor's closet with no back wall, just darkness, stretching into what looked like raw earth. Lisa marked each one with tape, trying to make sense of what she was walking through. But every time she returned, the layout changed. The women's locker room became a copy room. The evidence vault became a stairwell to nowhere. It was like the building was breathing, rearranging itself in slow, silent exhales. And she had become its lung. At 4:17 a.m., Lisa finally sat in front of the old CRT monitor in dispatch room B. The screen was off, but her reflection stared back, oddly delayed. Behind her, movement. She turned nothing. But when she looked back at the monitor, her reflection had changed. Her badge was gone from her chest. Her mouth was moving, but she wasn't speaking. She touched her face normal, but on the screen, her reflection whispered one word again and again. Stay. Lisa stood up, heart pounding, and yanked the monitor's cord from the wall. Blackness. But when she turned to leave, the hallway outside was no longer empty. Standing there, motionless, was the same young man from the first call, the one found dead. Same clothes, same vacant stare. But now, he was smiling, not wide, not menacing, just enough to say, "You shouldn't have come this far." Lisa froze. Her instincts told her to run, but her legs refused to move. The dead man stood just 10 feet away, illuminated by a flickering hallway light that hadn't worked in years. She had walked this corridor daily. That bulb had always been dead, but now it pulsed in a rhythm that mimicked a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, alive. The man's eyes didn't blink. They weren't even focused on her. Instead, they seemed to look through her, like she was just part of the room, like he was waiting for someone else. Then, without moving his lips, she heard his voice, not with her ears, but in her mind, like a memory being replayed inside out. "You opened it," he said. Lisa felt cold press against her spine, not from the air, but from inside her. "Bones opened what?" She whispered aloud, her voice brittle. The man tilted his head. Behind him, the walls began to shimmer, not like light hitting paint, but like the surface of water touched by wind. The building was bleeding into something else. She looked at her feet and saw floor tiles giving way to concrete, then soil, grass, roots, an entire forest beneath her shoes. And above, the ceiling had disappeared entirely. Stars, hundreds, then thousands. A sky that didn't match any place she'd ever known. Lisa's breath caught. The man took a single step forward, and with that step, the hallway collapsed into a wooden cabin she'd never seen, but felt she had once lived in. She could smell firewood and blood. Her badge was gone, her clothes different, her hands cut, trembling, holding a revolver. She blinked, and the man was across the table now, smiling. "You're ready," he whispered. And then, the room answered, not with sound, but with silence that pressed dot in that moment. Time folded inward. Lisa wasn't standing in a cabin anymore. She was sitting across from the man in an interrogation room that looked like hers, but wasn't. Everything was dimmer. The lights above buzzed but never fully lit the space. There was a camera in the corner, but it was facing the wrong way, filming. Only shadow. Her voice trembled. "What is this?" The man smiled gently and finally blinked. "This is the answer to your question," he said. "The one you buried under reports, under noise, under the illusion of duty." His tone wasn't cruel. It was tender, intimate, as if they had shared years together in silence. Lisa tried to speak, but her throat constricted. She looked down and saw her notepad on the table, except it wasn't blank. Each page had a different symbol, symbols that pulsed with meaning she couldn't decipher, but instinctively feared. Her pen moved on its own, scratching new lines that bled ink into shapes. And then those shapes moved. She dropped the pen and backed away, but her chair didn't move. It was as if gravity itself had shifted, locking her in place. "You weren't meant to solve the case," the man said. "You were meant to remember it." Lisa's pulse accelerated. She wasn't Lisa anymore, not just Lisa. She was someone else too, someone older, someone who had once made a promise beneath a sky with 3 moons. Her memories cracked open like an egg. She remembered names she'd never heard, faces she'd never seen, a door she swore to never open, a truth so old it didn't use words. The man leaned forward. "This isn't a case," he said softly. "It's a return." And then the lights finally shut off. But the room didn't go dark, only deeper. The next morning, Lisa woke up at her desk. Her head rested on a stack of files, her notepad beside her blank. The room was warm, the kind of warmth that made you question if anything strange had happened at all. Sunlight poured through the dusty blinds like nothing had changed, but everything had. Her heart didn't race, her hands didn't shake. Instead, there was a slow, sinking calm. She stood up, walked to the small bathroom in the corner, and looked in the mirror. Her face was the same, but her eyes weren't. There was a film over them, not something visible, but something felt, like looking out through the panes of glass, knowing one of them doesn't belong. On her way to the hallway, she passed by her fellow officers. No one looked at her strangely. No one mentioned her absence. No one noticed the silence that followed her like a scent. At her desk, there was a folder she didn't remember printing. It read, "Case 117B, reopened." Inside, there was a single photo, black and white, security footage, time-stamped exactly 1 week ago. To 17 a.m., it showed a hallway. Her hallway. At the center stood a man with no features, just a blur. But somehow, she recognized him, as if she had memorized the shape of his presence. There was a note beneath the image, handwritten in ink that shimmered faintly in the light. "Do not investigate. Remember." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the photo. The message wasn't a warning, it was a command. And worse, it felt like something she had written long ago, somewhere deep inside. A door had opened, and she couldn't close it anymore. Lisa sat down. The case wasn't just reopened. It had always been open. She was just now, finally, awake. Lisa turned the photo over, almost instinctively, and found a series of numbers scribbled in the same glimmering ink. 4204X. Her breath caught in her throat. Case 404X had been purged years ago, officially unsolved, unofficially forbidden. Even mentioning its name out loud had been enough to get officers transferred, or worse, forgotten. It was said to involve disappearances not of suspects, but of the investigators themselves. Officers who had once smiled in hallways, joked over coffee, lived real, breathing lives, had simply vanished, not dead, not relocated, just erased. Lisa had heard whispers in her academy days, warnings passed like urban legends with eyes that refused to meet yours. She never thought it was real. But now, that number stared back at her, written by a hand she couldn't deny was her own. She grabbed the file again and noticed something new. The paper smelled like ash, faint but distinct, like something had burned, not recently, but long enough ago to leave only the memory of fire. Her thoughts spiraled. Was this whole investigation a trap, not a pursuit of justice, but a lure? She pulled up the precinct database and typed in 404X, access denied. Red letters flashed across the screen. She tried another login. The night again. Then the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then all screens across the room went black. Her monitor turned on by itself, but it no longer showed the precinct interface. Instead, a live feed appeared, a camera facing a narrow hallway flickering, grainy, exactly like the image in the folder. But this time, the blur moved. It was walking, slowly. Closer, Lisa's breath shallowed. The time on the corner of the screen changed to 17 a.m. Tonight's date. This wasn't surveillance footage. It was a countdown, and she had just become the next name on the list. Lisa stumbled back from her desk as the image on the screen pulsed. Each flicker of static now seemed deliberate, as if it were breathing. The hallway in the footage grew more familiar by the second until she recognized the peeling wallpaper near the supply closet just outside her office. This wasn't archival footage. This was live, and whoever was approaching was inside the precinct. She grabbed her sidearm out of reflex, heart pounding against her ribs like it was trying to warn her of something words couldn't explain. The feed distorted again, then cut to black. On the screen appeared a line of text, typed in blinking green letters. You opened the file. You invited it. Behind her, a soft knock echoed down the corridor. Not aggressive, not urgent, just wrong. Lisa moved slowly, every step a betrayal of her instincts, and opened her office door to find the hallway empty. But on the ground, someone had slid a small envelope under the door. Her name was written on the front in the same mirrored handwriting from the folder. She picked it up with shaking hands, opened it, and pulled out a single photograph. It was her night sitting at her desk, face illuminated by the screen. In the background of the image, in the shadowed hallway, stood the figure, clearer now, closer, human in shape, but hollow in presence, as if something had borrowed the shape of a man, but forgotten how to be one. The back of the photo was blank this time, no clues, just silence. Lisa turned to her window, instinctively hoping for movement outside, but the streets were empty, not silent empty, and when she looked back at her screen, the live feed had resumed. The figure was now only 5 feet from the camera, and it was smiling. By the time Captain Hill returned to the precinct, the power had been restored, but something in the air felt off. The fluorescent lights buzzed slightly too loud. The coffee machine had overflowed by itself, and no one was at their desks. Every monitor showed the same frozen frame, a still from the hallway camera, but the timestamp was missing. Hill moved through the bullpen like a man walking through a dream on the verge of becoming a nightmare. He called out Lisa's name, no answer. Called dispatch, static. Picked up the internal line, no dial tone. On her desk, he found the folder marked Case 10 to be. The envelope was open. The photo was gone. The computer was still logged in, and the live feed was running, but only one camera remained active. Camera 5, the hallway. The figure was no longer there. Just empty space, no movement, just silence. Hill sat down slowly, staring at the screen, his own reflection ghosting over the glass. Then something flickered. A door opened at the far end. A man stepped into frame, wearing a police uniform, badge missing, hands empty. He walked slowly toward the camera with mechanical precision, like he wasn't entirely used to his limbs, and as he came closer, Hill froze. The man looked like him, identical, same uniform, same scar above the eyebrow, same tired eyes. The reflection on the screen no longer matched the face sitting at the desk. Hill blinked and the feed cut to black. He stood up fast, knocking the chair over, sweat rolling down his back. The lights flickered once. Then the hallway camera came, back online, this time from a different angle, from behind Hill, and as he turned to look over his shoulder, he heard a voice that sounded exactly like his own whisper. You were supposed to stay out of it. Hill stumbled back, breath caught in his chest like it forgot how to leave. The screen blinked again, static crawling across the glass like frost. And then came the footage. Not live, archived. Camera 5 again, but this time dated April 7th. The night Officer Lane disappeared. The timestamp reappeared to 17 a.m., the moment of the 911 call. Hill leaned in. The feed showed the hallway dark, quiet. Lane entered the frame, walking toward the evidence room. He looked nervous, hand brushing the wall like he was following a memory. He stopped at the door, swiped his card, but the door didn't open. Instead, the camera glitched. Just for a second. When it came back, Lane was gone. The hallway was empty, no sound, no movement. The door never opened. Hill rewound the tape, frame by frame. Lane enters. Glitch, Lane gone. No exit, no trace. But then one frame, one single, impossible frame. Lane was still there, but he was facing the camera, not walking, just staring, eyes wide open, mouth stitched shut, blood on his hands, and something in his expression that made Hill physically recoil. Not fear, not pain, but knowledge, like Lane had seen something on the other side of the lens, something watching them back. Hill paused the frame, printed it. The machine spat out the image like it wanted it gone, and in the print, clearer than on the screen, Hill saw something behind Lane, a shape, barely visible, a blur of a figure that had no eyes, no face, just a presence. Hill turned around, scanning the hallway outside his office, his own breath. Now a countdown, and then the lights shut off again, not all at once, one by one, from the far end of the corridor toward him. He grabbed his sidearm, but his holster was empty. The darkness wasn't silent. It hummed low, almost electrical, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Hill backed away from the terminal, eyes fixed on the hallway as the final light overhead flickered, then died. Now only the emergency red glows lined the floor, painting the room in veins of dim panic. Then a sound, not footsteps, a dragging, something heavy, wet, moving across the tile just beyond the threshold. Hill reached for his phone, no signal. The landline, dead tone. He was alone. Or he wasn't. The printed photo fluttered on the desk, caught in a breeze that shouldn't exist. And then it moved, not the paper, no, the thing inside it. The blurred shape, its head turned. Just slightly. Hill froze, watching the impossible unfold on glossy print. The shape shifted again, this time toward the lens, and then the paper. Blackened, charred edges curled like old leaves. By the time Hill reached for it, it had turned to ash in his hand. The hallway went silent again. The dragging had stopped, but there was no sound of retreat, no door, no escape. Hill turned slowly and saw the badge, his own, lying on the ground near the exit, as if discarded, like someone had already claimed it. He didn't remember dropping it. He didn't remember unpinning it from his chest, and as he reached down to pick it up, he saw the blood on the floor, fresh, still warm, still following his steps. And then the radio dead all night crackled once, a single phrase, whispered through static, "You were supposed to disappear too." The signal cut, and everything around Hill, every file, every memory, every light, every sound, folded inward like paper in fire. The case wasn't closed, it had only just begun.